Well, hello everyone. Peter and Laura Toggs here. Welcome to Parable Essentials, our podcast where we speak all things leadership, heart, soul, culture, and we want to welcome you today if you're a part of our church. Big hello, we love you. If you happen to be a fly on the wall, maybe you are tuning in from elsewhere in our city or our nation or all over the world, you are so welcome to be here too. Hope you're doing well. We're going to talk today about ministry, life, family, all of those good things.
It's a good concoction of those topics. I think it's important to speak into this topic because we have a lot of young families at our church, and not just young families, families in general. And I think the mix between ministry and family can be tedious. And so I think we have a little bit of experience. By no means have we nailed it, but I think we've journeyed that for some time now being in ministry. But before we get started, you were talking about like a global audience maybe touching in. I was like, whoa, we're going global now, are we? Who knows? That's the truth. And that's why I say you actually don't know because like I was looking at our YouTube platform the other day and it's actually really exciting because the last time I checked, there was only, a few, and by the way, I'm not about, how many subscribers or likes, but I think it does speak to the influence and the impact we may be having. But I looked last time, we had like 500 subscribers. I just looked a few days ago and it had like 130,000 subscribers. And I thought, who are you? And I'm sure they're gathering from all over the world. And so I think that's pretty cool. And that's my prayer for this podcast. And much of what we do at church is that it would just help people through all walks of life.
Yeah.
And so
it's funny, we're a church plant. And when we first started this podcast, it was really like, how do we engage with, our teams, our volunteers, we're people have full-time jobs, they have families, and we really want to have that consistent, regular input into who we are, where we're heading to, and so on.
Yeah.
But it's really formed from there. It's really grown. I think
great.
it's grown and it's developed, and I think we know that there is our heart is to reach people and to help people and to encourage people. So really, if you are tuning in from Zimbabwe, a big welcome.
Big welcome. I've never been to Zimbabwe, but shout out to those of you there. But Laura and I thought today we would visit the topic of ministry and family, or just being involved in church and it feels like a juggle sometimes. Laura, I'm interested, for those of you that may know, Laura has grown up in a ministry family, heavily ministry family. I actually came from quite the opposite. I didn't step into ministry till I was really after high school, but you grew up in it. I want to know like some of your stories. Give us some stories. Give us some what are some of your memories growing up with mum and dad who were, not only just high profile pastors, but also incredible pastors that were building and planting and busy with ministry, church, preaching every weekend. Like, what are some of your memories? Talk to us.
Well, and I'm not just saying this. I have like really, really fun, beautiful memories. Wow. And I've always felt like it was such a blessing more than it was a curse or a burden. And that's just me. I know that, plenty of other, pastors' kids or church kids or, ministry families, whatever you want to call it, have had different experiences. Yeah. But for me personally, if I just speak, from my perspective, I loved it. I have the most beautiful memories of like falling asleep, like underneath sound systems, underneath the chairs.
That's why you can't really hear me in the living room.
I think it has affected my hearing, but falling asleep underneath the chairs at prayer meetings and playing hide and seek, like in the big auditoriums and like as a kid, like all those things. I think I can imagine, my parents were probably like, oh, well, we've got school tomorrow. But really at the end of the day, like, I think it really formed my love for God, my love, like it contributed to my love for God. It contributed to like my love for the church,
So cool.
And I think from a very, very, very early age, I could say this about my brothers as well. We had this revelation within us, this personal revelation, almost like a conviction, like as strong as a conviction that, this is what we're called to do as a family. So it wasn't just like mum and dad's thing, like this is all of our thing. And because of that, it was just this like understanding, this is what we do and we love it. Yeah.
That is so cool. And we could honestly just end the episode right there because I think there's just such a wealth of experience and knowledge there that I think we can learn from. And I mean, I just look at your family, of who I know very well, and I look at you and your brothers, and in your own way, you guys are all still very involved with church and life and ministry.
I do think it is a testimony that we all, my brothers are both in their 40s now. I'm in my late 30s, and to this day we love God passionately for ourselves. We love the church. Like, I think that really is a praise report because we've had plenty of opportunities to be bitter, at the church, to like question God, but really to this day, we all just feel really cause driven.
That's such a good place to start because I think, and for us, we're on this journey looking at our lives, and sometimes people will think, oh, well, if we just pull back, that will help. But looking at your guys' story, which some people say, well, that's different for them or unique for them. But at the end of the day, you guys were still normal people.
Yeah.
That had to go to school, had to get to sport, were very busy. My brother played rugby league, the real sport in Australia, the real football. Played sport with her older brother, and I remember your dad, being there, and I know he had to travel and be at places, and he was a busy man, I'm sure, but I have distinct memories of him being at football games, and I just don't think you have to compromise when it comes to church and involvement and taking your family on the journey. And I think for you and I, fast forward to us having a young family, I think that's a decision we made very quickly up front, is that we're going to take our kids on the journey.
Yeah, and it's their journey as well.
And it's their journey.
We're not just like, come on, you're coming along for like our ride. This is a ride that we're on together.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important, is like instilling that in your kids. Like, and also this is about helping people. This is about encouraging people. Like it really, like from a young age, we're able to deposit that in our kids, that we are more than just about ourselves and about our own needs, but we get to contribute to other people's needs and help others. Yeah. And I think that's really important. I think as well, like a huge thing is the blessing always outweighs the sacrifice.
Wow. That's profound. Say that again.
The blessing always outweighs the sacrifice.
That's cool.
And so, maybe it is a sacrifice that we're out 3 nights of the week, or, for me personally, like, if my dad traveled to minister in the US or my mum was away or so on, like that could be a sacrifice. But the blessing of it all was always greater. And that wasn't something that like you had to speak into us. I've never heard my parents say that. That just was like something I lived. Wow. Something it was something that it was my experience. Yep. And I think we can be really intentional about that as parents, as families. For us, with our kids, it's like, how can we make this fun? We won't have an in-person essentials meeting, on a Wednesday night, but how can we make this memorable for our kids?
Yeah.
How can we create fun even on a Sunday? Like, our kids are, they're early, last to leave. Yep. Often they're like, Mum, Dad, can we go now? Can we go now?
I feel a bit guilty sometimes.
But at the same time, it's like, well, how can we make this a really great experience for them? So true. And so that's where you be intentional. Don't just expect it to happen, but be intentional and purposeful as parents to make it a beautiful experience for your kids.
And I think that's so important, because one of the danger zones as well, particularly if you get involved with church and you talk about some of the tensions just involved with working with other humans that can frustrate you in church life and ministry, or you're having this conversation with your husband or your wife, is something that I think we learned from your parents particularly, is to not have, some of the nitty-gritty conversations around your kids and to protect how you speak about it. Because if all your kids hear is the cursing of being involved in church, well, what do you think they're going to carry when they grow up? I love that you talk about the blessing of church. And I think that's a big reason why you love church, the local church still. You still have this adventure about you and this, this wide-eyed view of church, because maybe what was communicated around you in the living room was always like the blessing of church.
We have to be careful about little ears in our households. There's little ears and they're listening.
Yeah.
And something that we talk about is that we might talk about an issue or a problem or something that's going on, a tension that might be, something that we're navigating, and they pick up on that and they hear that. And later on, it's resolved, but they don't know that it's been resolved. Yeah. They've just heard something that's part of the story, not the whole story, and yet they carry that. And so it's true. Really important that we use wisdom, discernment, that we're aware, because sometimes we can be unaware, or it can look like our kids are like, distracted, but they're listening, they're picking up on everything. Our kids are very perceptive. My kids can read us, like they can read a room, can't they?
They can read my mind.
Yeah. And so I just think it's wisdom to just be very careful, choose your timing really wisely, choose your moments wisely.
Yeah.
And there's things, for us, I think we're pretty purposeful and we have our time, almost like work hours, and that's where we really get into the nitty-gritty. And when we get home, we let home be a sanctuary.
Yeah.
We let home be home. We let home be family.
Yeah.
And we talk about kids, how was your day? What's going on in your life? And we tell them about our day, but nothing that they're not ready enough. They're not mature enough to handle.
That's right. But we also are intentional about, we talked about this just a moment ago, but involving them in the journey.
Yeah.
And it's not just you're coming to join our journey. It's very much like, hey, this is our journey together. This is the funnest thing we've ever been a part of.
It's an adventure.
And it's an adventure. And, we still got young kids and still many years ahead of us. And don't get me wrong, we're still learning as well, the stretch and the juggle and the balance and how we do that. And we'll learn some tips along the way. But what I do love about our church, our newly planted church, is I love seeing the kids ministry, Parable Kiddos, but I also just love seeing kids before and after church run around. And it's chaos in every way. Even just this weekend gone by, I'm pretty sure I think it was my kids, but they're just chasing each other. They're playing tip, they're playing hide and seek, and they're pulling down the banners. They're wrecking things. And whilst one part of me is like, come on, guys, the other part is like, this is the sort of church we prayed for.
Yeah.
We wanted to be a part of. The chaos of kids. And I love seeing, Grace and Dan's kids or Beck and Luke's kids running around.
Gracie will be, rehearsing with her little baby attached to her.
Oh, I love
it's just, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful. That's the church that we want to be. And
Seven Tab are there early, and their kids are there with them through rehearsal and through set up, and it's special.
I really love it. And my prayer is that those kids would be, they'd grow up to love the house of God, because their memories were, hiding under the chairs and playing tip. And, I love it. And that's the sort of church. I mean, even just some of our team meetings that we have during the week, sometimes there's just kids screaming, crying, sometimes our kids in these meetings that, are kind of serious. But I love it because it's the chaos and the blessing of ministry. And I think I never want to move too far away with that. And that's why I think that's the sort of teams we want to be a part of. That's the sort of leaders we want to raise up, bringing their families in on the journey. What would you say to young mums and young dads, but young mums, because there's a lot of, pressure on the mums when it comes to new babies and embracing the growth and the stretch of that season, but also embracing that season of nurturing, what would you say to those individuals that may be tuning in?
Well, firstly, I would say that there is no pressure. And I think that's really important to know. I think, for me personally, I just loved kind of having my babies around and part of the journey. Yeah. And I felt like they were more, flexible, adaptable, go with the flow kind of kids because of that. Yeah. But really, I think that's such a precious season of life. Yeah. And nurturing, your babies is like it's such a beautiful, honestly, God anointed time, and it carries the presence of God in a way that's just so stunning. Yeah. And so I think really like you have to use, follow the Holy Spirit and stay in a place of peace. I think that's really important. That's cool. But I really do think that there's something very special. We had our babies, well, the two older ones when we were youth pastors. And there's just something really like...
And we were in our early 20s.
Early 20s. And I think it was really fun, though, like to kind of take our babies along to youth. And it creates this fun connection between you and the teenagers. And they love, like they look at... I think they look up to, older... young married couples with like families and go, oh, I can't wait to do that one day. There's a really great opportunity to be mentors and to exemplify what it is to be a mum. So I really think it's beautiful. I think it's a very personal journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I was actually looking at one of my pastor friends' posts the other day on social media, and I loved it because he was thanking the mums that were in the parenting rooms who were probably like, why do I even bother when I'm in the parenting room, missing half the service? Mm-hmm. And he was just writing a post saying, thank you for your contribution. Yeah. And if that's all you can do to serve the church right now is bring your babies and be in the parent rooms, thank you. And I just want to say thank you to our parents who do that, our mums and dads who come, who have young babies, and whilst that comes with a price, and you do everything you can to get the kids in the car, then bring them to church, and then you're in the parents' room or you're changing nappies or whatnot. I just want to say thank you, because that is contributing to the house of God. Don't underestimate your presence being there and what that does.
It's also, it's worship.
Yeah.
I think.
It's their worship.
It is. Right. It is. It's like you might be in the parents' room and you're changing a diaper or a nappy, whatever you want to call it. But that is part of your worship.
That's right.
And so it's...
and it's seasonal.
Yes.
Life is lived in seasons. Yeah. If it's not changing a diaper, you're dealing with a teenager. And that comes with new dynamic. We're in that new dynamic. Whilst I have been a leader and youth pastor of teenagers for the last 14 years. I now have a teenager myself, and
the parenting game is completely
different and nothing trains you for this season of hormones and the disrespect. I'm actually joking. I get none of that. They're actually amazing children. But I think the stretch for families is to be embraced. Don't try to fight it. Yeah. And life is lived in seasons. And there are seasons of stretch. Stretch is a good thing. Yeah, Jesus, when he was feeding the 5,000 people, he looked at Philip, and it says it in the Message version, and he said to Philip, what should we do to feed these people? Jesus knew what he was going to do, but the Bible says, or Eugene Peterson says, he said this to stretch Philip's faith. God wants to stretch you. And I think stretch comes with discomfort. That's why we do stretches before we work out or after we work out. That's why in order for a muscle to grow, you have to push it beyond its capacity. And that's where the growth comes. The growth actually doesn't come in the first 2 reps. It comes in that last 2 or 3 reps. Listen to me, like I'm some gym fitness guy. But it's the last 2 or 3 reps where you can't push anymore. That's where the muscle growth happens. The fitness actually starts to happen. And I think it's the same when it comes to marriage, ministry, family, church. Embrace that stretch. Don't snap yourself. Don't overdo it. You're overdoing it if your babies are out 7 days a week. going to bed at 10 p.m., yes, you are going to pay the price of that. And we have done that and made that mistake. But also, we have also embraced those nights where, you know what, our kids have gone to bed later than normal. And I'm actually a routine person. I love routine in my own life, but sometimes I do think routine's overrated, but everyone just has to find what works for them.
Yeah, totally.
As well.
It's a personal journey.
It's a personal journey. Yeah. Our journey is going to be different to your journey, and that's all good as well.
Yeah.
But my prayer is that we would embrace the stretch, and really take our families on the journey. Never underestimate what being in an environment like church will do for your children.
Yeah.
Being in an environment where hopefully they are inspired. I know for me, growing up in church as just a young lad myself, being at conferences or being in these spaces, I looked at people and I want to be like that. Totally. I want to do that with my life. Yeah. And I think there's something really special. Don't underestimate bringing your young people and putting them in an environment where they're inspired to grow, inspired to do something with their life that, you know, that's why I was here on earth to do that. And I think why I'm doing what I'm doing today, and I know so many of my friends and loved ones who would say, because we're in an environment where we were forced to dream big. Just don't underestimate what can happen being in an environment, your children being in that sort of environment. So, look, I think we've only touched on bits and pieces of, you know, church and family. Again, it's just our story. By no means have we made it or are we perfect. But I think life doesn't actually have to be a juggle. It actually doesn't have to be a balance. Something that we have tried to ingrain in our church is that life's a rhythm. Find your rhythm. That's something we've been talking about, is you have a different rhythm to the rhythm that we have. And, you know, here I go with my long distance running illustrations again. But when it comes to running or long distance, you've actually got to find a rhythm that works for you. And some people don't last the distance because they run too hard, too quick. And if you want to last the distance, you've actually got to find a cadence that works for you. My prayer for our church and anyone listening is you would find a rhythm for your family that adds to your life. We want everyone that is involved with church, that serves in church, that serving, coming to church adds to your life. It doesn't take away from your life. And I pray that we would have a church and a people that would put God first in every area of their life, but particularly when it comes to church, that they would prioritize being a part of it and being a part of the answer. And I think that comes with having a healthy rhythm. Find your rhythm. What's your rhythm when it comes to church life and ministry? So, listen, Laws, is there? This is something that we'll keep unpacking, and we'll do another episode. Maybe we can get to know some of our, families who are involved in ministry, and even some of our friends who are in ministry, and we'll continue this conversation because I think this is something that can really help families continue to embrace the stretch, but feel like they don't have to keep taking a step back to prioritize family. Don't get me wrong. Family should come first.
Yes.
Along with Jesus.
Yeah.
But I don't think it has to be an ultimatum. It's either this or that. I think there is room to do both and do it in a healthy, sustainable way. Is there any kind of departing words, Laws, that you would add to that as we finish up? Or you think we've said it all?
I love what you were talking about just before where you said your family comes first. Yeah. Because that's so true. And I just remembered this story of my dad was traveling, and I found myself in a really, really like crazy situation when I was like 16 or 17 years old. And my dad just said, "I'll come home right now." And wow. And I think like just your kids knowing that, I was like, no, you don't need to. You don't need to. But like just knowing that's, you know, you'll find that your kids are really releasing and really empowering and really up for the journey. Wow. As long as they know, like they know that they do come first. Yeah. And so, I just encourage.
Wow, that's a great thought.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's so good. And it's so true. And I mean, knowing your parents, his kids, their kids, came first in everything, but somehow they were able to, build this incredible movement, but still their family was their priority,
Yeah.
And I guess that's sort of what we want to keep building into our church, and we want to take these families on that journey. And so, listen, we'll continue this conversation because I think it's a hot topic, and we want to help people do this journey well. And so, but without further ado, I think we'll call it there. Thanks for joining us. For those of you who have made it this far, Parable Essentials podcast, where we talk all things leadership, and whether you're an internal, external, such a pleasure to have you here. We'll be seeing you soon. We love you. Bye.